Hello there. So, I've got about 48 minutes until midnight. I'm going to tell a little Christmas story. It involves how I came to believe. It involves why I can't even, you'll understand when I'm done telling it. Now, I was born in 1980, grew up, raised in it, believed like kids do, but I got to be real honest. The first time I saw the movie Stargate, I had questions. And over the course of my life, I've been subjected to a number of different experiential weirdnesses, most of which can pretty well be explained these days. Used to conk my head a lot back here, up here, when I was a kid, slip and fall all the time, whoosh, boom. Grew up in a time when autism and autism spectrum was not really as understood or widely accepted or, grasped by people to where it could be worked with. As a consequence, I was raised by parents who understood that I was something different, but felt that the best way to do it was to be like, nope, you're as normal as they come. And to most extent, I believe that was successful. It's a lot of stuff I've had to figure out and unlearn. Part of that was, over the course of my life, before I came to understand things like the steps of the grieving process, I had built my worldview and my personal spiritual belief system around events of my life that included effectively what you could think of as revolts against fate or God or whatever. Circumstances worked out in ways that I didn't like, and seems to me in some cases people's minds split at that point. That's where some kind of schizoid moment occurs, and from then on they've got all of these triggers. Mine wasn't quite like that. It was just like denial, and eventually, like I had some friends. It was a kid that was my age, and his younger sister and older brother, all three drowned in the same incident, taking all children from their parents' family. And I was like, what kind of God that I've been told exists and is allows shit like that to happen? And I'm not the only person that has asked a question like that. But in the process of failing to adequately cope with the loss, I revolted. And I would tell people I was an atheist. But the thing is, most people that talk about atheism are not actually non-believers. They are unbelievers. There's a difference. That's not what I'm here to talk about. But I wanted to put a little context on. It took direct interaction with higher powers for me to believe that higher powers exist, where most people are able to get by on some sense of faith, things that they have been told, say some prayers, life takes a turn and it's good. I tried for years. It was weird. It was like I thought I'd already given up. I thought I'd already let go. I thought I'd already done the things. And there were still things I was holding on to. And it turned out to ultimately be pieces of ego. And it wasn't until everything was stripped and pared and torn from my life by what was obviously a higher power at work that I was like, okay, now I understand what this surrender thing is supposed to be about. Do it, whatever you're going to do. And then 2019 and 2020 and 2021 and 2022 and 2023 and 2024 and 2025. And now we're going into 2026. I knew there were things. I had seen things. I had dabbled in serious occult shit that I do not advise. I had bent reality. I had experimented with psychoactives. I had taken every route. It was like the Buddha tried all the different things and could not find his enlightenment until he just sat and watched people for 2 weeks. And I'd already done that. There's patterns, there's routines. It's like you could convince yourself that people are drones. The truth is they're not. They're all exactly like you and me. All of us. Unless I'm the Boltzmann brain for real. They're exactly like all of us. People's is people's, right? But that wasn't even the true enlightenment. Because there's more. That was the transcendence of the material. But that was just like stepping through the curtain. And it was in his entire life to do that so that others could follow. And, in the course of my life, I have experienced something that I now, in retrospect, can say felt like some kind of resurrection. I attempted on my own life, and I was fully unconscious, and I felt my body coming back, and it wasn't slipping into awareness. There was the I am isness was already there. It was like, oh yeah, but it was just darkness. But then I could feel this, it came from what felt like above, and it was like flesh tone and quantum ripples. And as it moved down, I became aware of my body and the room that I was in and everything else, my life, my identity as this dude that you're seeing talk to the camera and upload. But I also came back different. And, I've talked to some people way since then, much later, when I was driving cab, talked to a guy that had a stroke, that he had this thing with numbers and memorization after having his stroke. He's like, it's hard to walk, it's hard to talk, but I remember every number. And I was on a trajectory already of like some kind of self-actualization arc, that things were just happening within myself, my spirit, my body, everything. And the life around me was also having similar things, that there was definitely some kind of an arc. And then there was that moment, and coming back, and I don't remember necessarily an experience of afterlife or anything else. It was just the darkness. I don't believe that I died. I believe that I was fully unconscious in like a clinical sense, and that coming back out of that was a hard reset that, I don't know, it's hard to explain. But even after that, I had experienced things that could be chalked up to other mental illnesses or drugs. So I came to a point of my occult exploration that I was like, it's time to stop this nonsense. This all leads back to the Bible. So I kind of start examining some things about what I'd learned and relearning, and getting into more Gnostic stuff and comparing between, and between what these things are saying and what I've experienced now, what can I filter? What can I do with this? And, I can't explain it now. It's a personal journey for every person to find faith or spirituality or religion or whatever. But I understood that God is a thing. God is definitely real. Because a lot of these other things exist that I've experienced, and many of which can be explained. So if you've delved into any of the Gnostic stuff or any of the actual gospel of Jesus within a Gnostic context, knowing the language that these people used, paying attention. He said, those who have eyes to see, those who have ears to hear, that you can understand that there's something being spoken about here that is more than just what the words say. And a number of those things have echoed through my life where just that was the necessary advice, and it would pop into my head and I knew where it came from. And it wasn't Jesus contacting me, it was my subconscious pulling pieces of the Bible. And this all within the understanding that I know that God is real. And I'd been on the fence when it came to the Jesus thing. My dad was a pastor. He was very much into the historical thing, but even there, I couldn't get with half of the supposed historical stuff. What I can find so far these days with the internet advantage is that, yes, it appears that Pontius Pilate wrote a letter to do with the events that occurred in the crucifixion and scourging first of a guy that these local Jewish people really fucking wanted dead. And that some weird shit transpired afterward. There were supposedly other witnesses. These are like historically confirmed. It's not just a matter of opinion. This is a thing that something happened to some dude and these people were like, yeah, we saw it. Here's what happened. And it's like, okay, that's cool and all. I had heard that the Shroud of Turin was a thing. I'd heard that it had been debunked. Now, as I was trying to say a moment ago, this is a lot to keep together. There was something that was in the gospel and in the Gnostic stuff that kind of had stuck out to me. And now I can't think of it.
Red Rider.
Wrapping for her copy of Look magazine, would find herself cleverly trapped into reading a Red Rider sales pitch.
That's smart.
Did you hear about this guy who swallowed a yo-yo?
Swallowed a yo-yo?
Yeah, some clodhopper down in Griffith, Indiana.
How do you even do that?
What?
Okay, so he said, somebody asked him about the end times, and he said, well, why are you bothering about the end? You should be worried about the beginning. The beginning is where you will find the end, or something to that effect. So I'm going to start with the end part to explain how I get to the beginning. So being on spectrum, kind of locked into logic, I can't, it's not a matter of order. There are autistic people who are not stuck with just actual verbal logic, like real, like cause and effect, consistency, logic, actual logic, that they just go with whatever it is that was established initially and it must be rigidly followed. That's why certain people of autistic flavoring have the weirdness about the shapes of things or certain colors or certain sounds. They can be very ordered and some of them learn logic, but not all of them are with that. So it got to a point for me where the questions outweighed the answers. I had too much doubt to be able to have faith. I come to learn about some of the more recent research into the Shroud of Turin. And so we start at the end of his life to explain why I believe the beginning of his life. they've done a number of studies now that have determined that the previous debunking of the Shroud of Turin was incorrect, because what the carbon dating measured was the scorch from the fire, not the fiber itself. And the fiber itself, purely sampled, dated back to the time of Christ. There is another piece of fabric that came with it that was kind of the headrest, that was all folded up into a small little thing that was then he was laying face down in the shroud, and this thing was holding his face up. And there's matching marks to the little 3-shaped thing that was a pin that was, I think, in the crown of thorns or something. All the signs of a particular struggle, a particular series of events, and a particular end are present in 3 different frames of animation contained within the images. You can separate into 3 different positions that this body is in. There are 3 flashes that occurred. And they said it is as if some kind of a laser was projected perfectly parallel behind and through and everything from within the center of this body from an infinite distance. That's what it calculates to. There is something pretty much miraculous going on there. Science has simply said, yes, we can tell you that this ain't what they thought it was. This is something entirely else. It appears to be something that is way beyond what any of the philosophy, mathematics, or scientific understanding could have come up with at those times, and then be faked in a realistic way that modern science would say, wow, that looks like it might actually be real. This dude may have beamed out through the fucking shroud. This dude might have just, disintegrated and gone back to heaven or whatever. There's option 1. It's what the story says it was. Option 2, it's something else meant to trick people or whatever, see also Satan. But I kind of have a logical reason to get away from that. Falsifiability, I feel like it's been overcome. That while, yes, I mean, the as it's been said, there would be brush strokes. There's a number of different reasons why this is clearly something that is more of a, the radiation singed just the one tiny little layer of the cloth, and it was basically laser light, and it came from the center of where the body was. And there's a lot of really interesting topology on the thing. And like I said, it's like 3 flashes, 3 frames, and it looks like the hand is moving to pull the nail out. There's all this. Okay, wow. So that was enough to give me thought. And after extensive thought and more studies coming out saying, yeah, there's more to it than just a picture of a dude on it. Like there's frames of animation. Okay, I'm starting to believe. At the same time, I've been figuring out how to pray. And this sounds weird, but it's like, if you're praying and you're not sending a signal, you're just talking to the room. But it's like, there is a mental space, which some have described as a vibrational frequency or whatever, but it's just a way of generating an emotional state inside your mind that when you then pray in a correct way, things can happen. So previously, in order to have something like a prayer actually be answered, and that doesn't mean wishes granted. Don't think it means wishes granted. But to have a prayer answered required me to do angel magic and summon one particularly powerful angel to ask a question to be sent off, and then await the return of a different particularly powerful angel who may or may not also be somewhat related to the devil and or demiurge, whose story is upcoming. Finally, at one point, I was able to just say a prayer, and in this case, pray a psalm. That's my preferred way of doing it. Pray a psalm. There's also the Lord's Prayer, but you got to understand what it means in order for anything to work. And it's not Amazon. You're not ordering shit. It's emotional, like moodscapes. It is, protection from inner darkness kind of thing. Because otherwise, you yourself are fully capable of handling just about anything that comes your way as designed. That's what I've come to understand. My 3 rules that come underneath of the 5 steps are like pre-programmed instructions waiting to be like unzipped. So hell yes, all that shit's real. And I do see it in daily life because it tends to sometimes follow patterns of things around me as I'm traveling amongst large numbers of people. Particular thought crosses my mind. Other people do some weird stuff. I'm not causing it. We're all just being affected by the same wave. And like I said, third possibility, there are 3. Third possibility, it's something that none of us understand and isn't actually the thing that maybe we thought it was either. That must be considered possibility. But in the meantime, if it looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, and flies, it might be a duck. And in fact, probably is, if it isn't some kind of goose or swan. So, with that kind of logic in play, I don't know anything about the virgin birth. I can't say, I can't cite, there's nothing. There is a non-canonical infant gospel which tells the story of some instances of the child's life growing up with fucking mad powers and being a kid, which means like toddler vengeance and stuff, but on like a literally Jesus tier level. And in that gospel, which I don't know, like I said, I don't even know about this book. I know that it's an old thing. It's been kept up in some circles. It's considered either deuterocanonical or apocryphal. But in this volume, the only people that are resurrected are the ones that he first killed. So I don't even know. I can't qualify an opinion on it. I don't know enough. What I do know is that the Sethian Gnostic demiurge story, where the Eon of Wisdom, for some reason, decide, here's the thing. I understand wisdom requires experience. It requires mistakes in order for insight. So it created something without the spirit to compare to the spirit in order to better serve the spirit with wisdom. That's what that story is about, right? But there's a coda to it, because if such a thing actually occurred in the spiritual realm, it would mean that somewhere in the infinite multitude, there would have to be an instance of one of those hellish pocket universes where there is some kind of imprisoned race or being or whatever that is, like you got the Mark Twain vision of Satan. You've got it creating a universe to serve it, but really most of the things in that universe just are clay made to fuck around with. It's trapped in its own prison, but it keeps them as prisoners. And that some of them are capable of achieving transcendence, and part of their spirit goes back into the wisdom of the resurrected Eon, because in the story of Pistis Sophia, the coda to the reality of the rulers, the Savior comes down and rescues Sophia and restores her to her place with her power, thus draining energy from the demiurge. In doing this, this also fits with part of the demiurge story about an Eon, or an Archon rather, that rebelled. So even where the demiurge had his mockery of the 7 angels of the presence, one of them was its own version of Satan, which means the angel of truth in Yaldabaoth's twisted, messed up universe. And this angel of truth acted like a lightning rod, allowing the spirit from the emanation of Christ all the way up near the top at the fullness to insert into the pocket universe and restore the wisdom. And that explains why such a thing could happen. And it's like, okay, so you have a basis for this in spirituality that doesn't just say, because God said so. You have something in our universe, a physical proof of something that seems to me like it's probably a miracle or something in this weirdly singed, seems like 3 frames of animation of Jesus pulling the nails out of his hands and, slipping through the cloth as if it doesn't exist. After having been brutally fucking tortured and murdered. So maybe there's some truth to that shit, Logically speaking, maybe there is. Logically, though, the birth was on Rosh Hashanah, which is in like September or October, depending on the moon. That is the Feast of Trumpets. Whatever the date, about 3 or 4 BC, on the Feast of Trumpets would have been the actual Christmas day, the actual day of the birth. What we do now is Yule in the wintertime. And what Yule in the wintertime actually started as was kind of a pagan way of keeping warm in the cold months. It's a Celtic pagan thing for the most part, very European. And so Christmas got wrapped into it. I don't mind it personally. I like it. I like the season. I like the feel of it. I like all of it. And getting people to celebrate and gather and whatever, and that's all fine and cool and everything. But I also ponder Christmas on Rosh Hashanah because that is the actual birthday. So while the official famous person day observed written on the calendar is December 25th, the actual day of birth, because sometimes you'll see that be like Washington's birthday observed, Washington's birthday, right? Or whatever. Feast of the Trumpets, that's his birthday. I would love to be able to know more about the beginning circumstances, the things that aren't known. However, I also think that it might be okay to have enough to do a little bit more than faith, to have trust. And once you have trust, then it's like, in my experience now, crazy shit happens very infrequently. When it does, I know what psalm to pray inside my head, and maybe even out loud. And within about 15, 20 minutes, typically, maximum 3 days time, something shifts. I don't have to say shit. I don't have to do nothing. But go about what it is that I'm meant to be doing. And if I'm not going about doing what I'm meant to be doing, it doesn't work. That's how I know that I'm doing what I'm meant to be doing, because it works. So anyways, that all sounds weird and everything. But the thing is, it's possible that all the stuff with the angel talking to the shepherds and the 3 wise men and all of that stuff, the 3 wise men may have arrived on December 25th. But he was born in like September. So Merry Christmas, everybody. I got 20 minutes until it's calendar Christmas here. That little baby is the freaking king, dude. The king. And not because he's, there's going to be a battle fought, supposedly, right? We'll get into that some other time. Maybe that's already happening too. But for now, for the celebration of the day, for the mood and staying with everybody else in the gigantic emotional send-off, I wish all of you a very Merry Christmas.